The false dichotomy between communism and capitalism, and the end. Not to say there are no real differences between communism and capitalism. It is obvious that there are. Nonetheless, either one can in effect take you to the same place, so as to make any differences irrelevant. For example, imagine a large city. Here we will give it a name and call it socialism. Two men can arrive at that city, going in the exact opposite directions, if one is on the east side and the other on the west. While communism is an end never attained, capitalism is a beginning never retained. The end result of both is socialism. For while communism begins with socialism and never works its way out, capitalism works its way in and never finds its way out. The differences then are superficial, once both are socialist. Indeed, in a sense, the communists are actually the more real of the two, for they give their people a leader, while the capitalists give their people a string puppet. The problem with communism as a government is that it is a fantasy that cannot truly exist. The problem with capitalism is the reality that does exist. When left unchecked, capitalism devours everything around it, creating monopolies of power that bind together and become the puppeteers of those whom they place in power, even as the public disregards the reality of it, because they are offered a choice of chocolate or vanilla every 4 years or so. We have been presented with a false dichotomy by proponents of both ideologies, that between communism and capitalism, one is good and the other evil. The truth, however, is different. There is no moral virtue in either system. Indeed, it may come as a surprise to some that both can be good and both can be evil. It is not the system that possesses goodness. The morality of the people involved are the determining factor, and both communists and capitalists use scriptures to support their practices. Indeed, to the chagrin of some, we find different passages in the Bible where practices of both systems are extolled. As we read in the 2nd chapter of Acts, "And all that believed were together, and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and imparted them to all men, as every man had need. And they continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart." So then, in a sense, the basic idea of communism is an imitation of Christianity without God, and communism without God is the devil. The differences between the communal practices of the early church and the godless communists can be summed up in 2 words: free will. The first Christians gave voluntarily. Participation was a choice from the heart. The communism of the world is totalitarian bondage. So we see it as a heart condition and not the system that determines virtue. To the contrary, in chapter 31 of Proverbs, we find praise for the virtuous woman. Quote, "She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant." She is a capitalist. We see then it is not the system, but the foundation of practices wherein we find goodness. Communism is based on trust in man. Capitalism came about by way of freedom, stemming from a distrust of man. Communist was given power. To the contrary, freedom came by powers that were taken away, prohibiting government to infringe on the God-given rights of the individual. Nonetheless, all systems fail if the foundations are corrupted. As it is stated in Psalm 11, "If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do?" John Adams said, quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And so it is. The foundations of freedom have been destroyed. What remains is a shell of democracy inhabited by demons. The capitalism that has made us rich has become crony capitalism, both feeding the swine while at the same time sucking on its teats. Furthermore, those over us have expanded their prostitution beyond the military-industrial complex to the monopolization and consolidation of virtually all great corporate powers. Indeed, going so far as forsaking the interest of the people and selling our nation out to the agendas of the globalist. To the question, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? There's only one thing to do. Stand on the immovable rock of Jesus Christ. For God, whose voice once shook the earth, has promised, "Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven." And this word, "yet once more," signifies the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Wherefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably, with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. For he has said, "I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible." And he also said, "I will make a man more precious than the fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir." And that's how it all ends. And the government shall rest on his shoulders forever.